Dr. Meenu Bhambani is an international Ford Foundation scholar and has led corporate social responsibility at Emphasis for many years, focusing on engaging with the development sector, particularly in the areas of education, disability inclusion, and livelihoods. Dr. Bhambani has published extensively on CSR and disability inclusion too. How did you feel about leading your company's CSR initiatives?
In my current role, I'm not leading CSR, but in my previous avatar, in my previous role, I was heading CSR for more than 12 years. Um, it was a conscious decision to move into that space after having worked with a non-profit, especially working on advocacy. I wanted to be in a space where I saw the struggles of the non-profit sector in getting funding for advocacy, in getting funding for real change. And I was looking for opportunities where I could change the narrative from the other side, be an insider and understand that side to be able to bridge the gap that exists between the non-profit world and the CSR world, and how do these come together with a clear focus in mind that I am committed to disability, and how everyone is funding education, employment, livelihoods, primary areas. But within that, who is looking at disability? Whether from education perspective, whether from employment or livelihood or skilling perspective, no one. And so I wanted to bring in that perspective in the grant giving space in India. It was being done by foreign funders, but not by Indian CSR.
How much freedom did you have to decide what projects to take up?
I was very fortunate that I had a lot of freedom, and I was blessed to have a committed leadership around me. And I think I was blessed because I also came empowered with data. I came with lived experience. I came with a professional degree, which also made me very articulate about the whole issue of disability rights, where the gaps are, where most people were not able to articulate it.
Do you think more people with disabilities should lead CSR projects focused on disability issues?
More than that, yes, having the lived experience really helps. But I think most importantly, it's also important that people who are leading it are also aware of not just their own lived experience, but also about the sector, about the real life uh, experiences of all other kinds of disabilities, because you are in a situation or you are in a position to represent an entire sector and not just your own lived experience.
What are some things you've done that make you feel elated?
There are three things that stand out for me. The first one was opening of Office of Disability Services at IIM Bangalore, which empowered students with disabilities to ask for reasonable accommodation in a dignified way, where they were not rejected on the basis of disability and they were provided the right kind of support. Till today, that center continues to remain a beacon of hope for a lot of students with disabilities. That center gives, so there are so many students who clear CAT, students with disabilities, but majority of them opt for IIM Bangalore because there is an Office of Disability Services that exists there. So I'm very proud of that. Working with NCPEDP to support advocacy through Emphasis Universal Design Awards and converting that into a program where we advocated with 5 ministries to change from an accessibility perspective and also look at the big picture of passage of Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. Third one was experimenting. I mean, I was so fortunate to be given a blank slate to experiment, to fail, to restart. And I think that is that is something that I'll always be grateful for. So, because of that, Uber Access and Uber Assist happened in the city of Bangalore, which became the first city in Asia to have Access and Uber Assist. And fourth one is Museum of Art and Photography, which is India's first museum, which is inclusive and accessible for all kinds of disabilities. And I think those are the things that really stand out in my that journey.
What are your thoughts on the current situation? How does it compare to how things were before?
I think there is a positive change. Today, there are a lot many companies and their CSR that have opened to experimenting with or funding disability related causes. Although I still feel it remains in the domain of special education, it remains in the domain of employment, um, to some extent addressing the barriers from an infrastructure point of view, or providing of infrastructure, hardware or software support those who need it. But I still feel there is so much more to be done, and I think the CSR law is quite liberal in that sense because it allows you to experiment, and there still is a lot of need to experiment for path-breaking changes, for long-term changes, and which are not happening.
Where do you think this movement is headed?
You know, there was a point in this movement where entire sector was united behind certain causes, and behind one leader. So, and that leader would give that direction that elections are coming and we need to focus on making sure that voting is accessible and inclusive of people with disabilities. Census, we are not counted. RPWD Act, whole sector coming together to put pressure on the government to make sure that this goes through because this was impacting the entire sector. Today, I see lot many advocates and young advocates with disabilities. I think that is really positive. So many young people who earlier used to remain very shy about coming out and talking about disability, their own lived experience. I think that is a positive trend that I am seeing. But I'm also seeing that we are more disintegrated now and not really unified. So each disability is having its own voice, but somewhere it needs to again come together. So I think that is what is a direction that I am seeing this movement going into.
Mauritius was one of the first countries in the world to introduce CSR in 2009. India is the only country to mandate that companies with a net profit of 5 crore, a minimum net worth of 500 crore, or a turnover of 1,000 crore must contribute 2% of their profit to corporate social responsibility initiatives.